Greetings, denizens of the internet. As a dungeon master, have you ever picked out the perfect enemy from the monster manual, only to figure out that by the time your players got to them, that monster just wasn't powerful enough to give them the good challenge that you built it up to be? Or maybe the reverse, that your players got to that monster a little bit too soon, and now you're worried about a TPK.
Oh no.
Well, today Brian is going to teach you how to scale that bad boy up or down in order to fit the needs of your campaign. Stay tuned. My name is Brian Carey, and I am the Savvy Barbarian. If you're a dungeon master, you've already been there, and if you haven't, you will. You're playing with your characters, and they end up in a zone where the monsters you picked out, though they seemed ideal for your storytelling, just weren't cutting it. They're either too weak, or they're too strong for your characters. Let me give you an example. Your characters are running through a graveyard. You've picked out skeletons. It's the perfect creature for the setting. You don't want to change it. It's going to be skeletons. But by now, your characters are level 5, and they're blowing through skeletons like crazy.
Oh yeah.
So what can you do? This video I'm going to show you how to change the challenge rating of any monster to fit your players, to fit the scenario that they're in. There's basically 3 ways to do this. The first one is to use monster quick stats. It's right in the Dungeon Master's Guide, and I can create another video for that if there's interest. If people put comments down in the trumpery below, I'd be happy to make another video for that. The second way is to create a monster stat block from scratch. Now, the stat block is this area right here. All of this is your stat block. This is all you need to run your monsters. This gives me my ability scores, special skills, their languages, the challenge rating they have, and any special abilities that they have. I get my armor class, my hit points, and dexterity. The dexterity modifier is, of course, your initiative bonus. Now, the third way to modify your monster so it's an appropriate challenge rating is to cheat. And that's what I'm going to show you here today. How to actually use the stat blocks from one monster and apply it to another one. I'm going to try and give you a few things to think about, though, so you don't just willy-nilly go in and accidentally kill your party. TPKs being, of course, a bad thing typically.
Oh no.
And I'm going to run you through an example. Tweaking an existing stat block is a whole lot easier than creating a brand new one from scratch, or even doing the monster quick stat from the Dungeon Master Guide. So here's my scenario. I've got my players trapped in a prison, guarded by evil cultists. Now, I'm going to bring up my cultist stat block, and as you can see here, my cultists are at challenge rating 1/8. Now, a quick word about the challenge rating. Challenge rating is probably the best thing they've done to gauge things in Dungeons & Dragons as far as putting the right level of monster against the current level of your party. So the challenge rating is basically this. If you have a challenge rating of 1, that challenge rating 1 creature would be a match, a good challenge but not an overpowering challenge, for 4 players who are of level 1. Now, if you've got a challenge rating of 1/8, that means that this would not be a good challenge for even one level 1 player. My players are now level 4, so I'm going to look for a challenge rating level creature that's level 3 so that I can put in 2 of them, and I'm going to try to find a stat block from a similar creature that is at challenge rating level 3. The one that I've selected is the Knight. Now, the Knight is a challenge rating of 3. We see a few differences between the ability scores of the Knight versus what we have with the Cultist. Let me put those both up there for you real quick. Alright, so here's the Cultist and here is the Knight. What we're going to find is our ability scores are similar. There's a few things that this Knight has that are a little bit better. He has more strength and he has a lot more charisma. I don't want to put a whole lot of emphasis on the ability scores because they don't do as much as you'd think. So what I might do is I want my cultist to be at the level of this knight. So my cultist is challenge level 1/8, and I'm going to transform him into a challenge level 3 by stealing most of the knight's information and applying it to the cultist. But I'm not going to do it across the board. Now, one thing that I might want to tweak is I might want to increase the wisdom of the cultist, because he's going to be a guard, and I want him to have a higher perception. I want him to be able to notice if there's any escape attempts happening. So I might crank that up a little bit so he has a higher passive perception. After that, there's not a whole lot that I would need to change here, and I might keep the rest of this stat block just the way it is. Their attacks are going to come from strength, and my strength modifier is 0. I might turn that up. I probably wouldn't go all the way up to a 16, a 14, or a 15, because all this really does is it adjusts the attack and the damage roll. And it matters, but it's not the most important thing here. The most important thing, in my opinion, are some of these actions, the armor class, and the hit points. Let's start with hit points. As you can see, my cultist with challenge level 1/8 starts with 9 hit points. Well, my party is at level 4. They're going to one-hit this guy. They're one shot and he's done. If you look at the knight, if I used a pair of cultists with the knight's hit points, he has 52 hit points. It's a lot more damage that he can take before he falls. The other thing that you see that's a big deal is the armor class, between 12 and 18. Armor class is tricky, because if you make the armor class too high, the players aren't going to hit the monster, and they're going to lose. So this is one of the reasons that I like to pick an appropriate challenge level, so I can get that armor class and get the right armor class dialed in, so the players have a chance to hit this creature, but not so easy that they just take him apart right away. Now, another thing you can do is just throw a whole lot of these monsters at them. If you throw a lot of mobs, I could say, leave the cultists at challenge level 1/8 and just dump 10 of them on my 4 players. Yeah, I could do that, but that's actually kind of dangerous. When you think about the importance of the ratio between the players and the enemies, say you have 4 players and you have 8 cultists, and that's going to be your combat. That means that the enemy gets 2 shots on your team for every time the team gets 1 shot against the enemies. And you can see that can take your players down in a hurry. So keeping the numbers matched matters a lot. You'd like to go 4 against 4 if you can, or 4 against 2. Try and keep it somewhat balanced. If your players are fighting more monsters than there are of them, they're at an extreme disadvantage, even if they're playing against weaker monsters, because the monsters are going to have more opportunities to get hits in on your players. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to steal the knight's armor class and apply it to the cultist. I'm also going to steal the knight's hit points and apply that to the cultist. I'm probably going to leave these abilities just the way they are, although, as I said, I might goose up wisdom and I might goose up strength, but only by a couple of points. Wisdom might be 13, strength might be 13. I only have level 4 players, and they're going against a creature now that has 52 hit points apiece. I'm also going to change the actions here. So the cultist attacks with a scimitar, and he gets a +3 to hit, and he has a 5-foot reach, and he's doing 1d6 plus 1 slashing damage. The knight, as you can see, is doing 2d6 plus 3 slashing damage. This is a lot more appropriate. I'm going to steal this and apply it directly to the cultist. I'm also going to change his +5 to hit. He's getting this because he's getting +3 for his strength, and he's got +2 for his proficiency. However, I'm not going to take his brave function here. I'm not going to take his heavy crossbow. I'm going to leave the cultist with some of his default abilities, such as Dark Devotion. The cultist has advantage on saving throws against being charmed or frightened, because that's an appropriate function for this monster. So you can see by making just a few tweaks and stealing the information from an appropriate challenge rating creature, you can change your monster to something much more appropriate, and it'll be the right challenge rating for your players. Let's do one more real quick. Okay, this time let's go the other direction. This time we've got a level 1 party, and they've managed to find their way to the dragon. I'm going to pick a wyvern here. This wyvern is basically a dragon, but we're going to say, for the sake of realism in the story, that they have found a baby dragon, something that has just hatched, and they know they need to put a stop to it. So I've got this wyvern here, but my level 1 party is going to get wiped out by something that's a challenge rating of 6. And while the challenge ratings aren't perfect, and I can give examples of that, some of them are just off. One that comes to mind right now is an Intellect Devourer. This thing looks basically like a brain with dog feet on it. And what this thing does, it's only a challenge rating of 2, yet what it can do is eat your brain and take over your body, and now your other fellow players have to fight the Intellect Devourer in the body of one of their fellow players. It's a brutal monster. This is something that's really hard to beat, and I don't know why it's a challenge level 2. But at the same time, if you overshoot and give your level 1 players a challenge rating of 6, TPK time.
Oh no.
So we're going to take this wyvern and we're going to crank it down to an eagle. So as I said, this will just be a freshly hatched baby dragon that my party will get a thrill out of getting to kill a dragon right away. It'll just be a wonderful experience for them. Just some cool story that they started right out of the box doing something that neat. As you can see, I'm also always trying to pick a similar creature. So I'm picking a wyvern and a giant eagle. They're two flying creatures that have similar attack styles. They both have claws. They both have talons versus claws. They both have a beak or a bite. So both of these monsters are going to be able to do similar things, and that makes this process a lot simpler. Right away, one of the things that pops off the top of this is the armor class. This is a challenge rating of 1. I'm going to steal from the giant eagle and tweak my wyvern. My wyvern is a challenge rating of 6. And what's interesting to me is that they have the same armor class. As you can see, this challenge rating thing, sometimes that doesn't make all the sense in the world to me. The armor class is 13. The armor class is 13 here. Very interesting. So my players are going to be hitting this creature about the same amount of times. However, if you can see the hit points, the wyvern has 110 hit points compared to the giant eagle's 26. And this is the value I'm going to use on the wyvern. Otherwise, they have to do 4 times the damage. And when you think these are level 1 players, they're all going to have in the neighborhood of 10 hit points, some a little more, some a little less. So if the 4 of them get together and try to take down a creature with 26 hit points, it's still a challenge. They're never going to get through 110. The movement is another item here that we can pay some attention to, although I'm not as concerned about it unless it turns into a chase. The speed of the ground speed for the giant eagle and the wyvern are close, 20 feet and 10 feet, and they have the same flying speed. So the amount of travel they can do in the air is the same, and that's great. That means I picked a pretty close creature. As you can see, they have the same +4 to perception. They have some very similar actions, but you can see the wyvern's doing a lot more damage. His bite here does 2d6. On average, this is doing 11 points of damage per hit, where the bite, or the beak, from the giant eagle, his average is 6. So he's doing about half the damage, and that's going to make my player's chance of survival a lot better. Similar with claws versus talons, the wyvern does 13 versus the giant eagle doing 10. It seems a little high to me, and I might actually turn that down a little bit and make it 2d6 plus 2 or 1, just so I don't do quite so much damage. The players don't like it when you kill them all.
Oh no.
So I've taken the giant eagle's hit points, I've taken his speed, I'm probably going to take all of his ability scores, and I'm going to take the attacks. There's not a lot left. I'm basically taking this giant eagle and calling it a wyvern. And that is the quick and dirty way to adjust your monster's stat blocks. Is just steal another one is probably the simplest way to go. We've gone through 2 examples. Hopefully that helps. So that is the quick and dirty of it. That is the easiest way to adjust your monster's challenge ratings. I'm stealing parts off of other monsters and making those fit. Just as long as you give a little bit of thought to the number of monsters, because a lot of other monsters will take out your party. Give some thought to the armor class. Use the appropriate level armor class from the correct challenge rating, because if your players can't hit that creature, they're going to die.
Oh no.
And tweaking the damage and the attacks from the appropriate challenge rating is also just an easy steal. You grab those, next thing you know, you've got a creature that's the appropriate challenge rating. I will add this, however, and this is actually very important, so don't neglect this. And I'll paint the scenario. So at level 1, say your players have been cruising through the cemetery or through whatever the field of the undead, and they've been killing skeletons. And it was a little bit of a challenge for them at level 1. Not too bad, but they've been knocking down skeletons. Well, by the time they're level 5, skeletons are so easy for them. Now, you do this trick that we just discussed here, where you are amping up the character by using the stat blocks of the correct challenge rating creatures against your players. Your players are now level 5, and they are going to come across skeletons again. But your players are smart, and they're going to remember, as much as you want them to not metagame, they will. And they're going to know these skeletons are easy, but you have cranked up the challenge rating, and suddenly they're dropping on skeletons. Make sure you differentiate for your players the differences between the old skeletons and the new skeletons. Make some sort of tweak to them visually. Maybe these can talk, or these ones are dressed in black, where the other ones are dressed in red or something. These skeletons are all covered in chainmail and have metal reinforcements. Do something to inform your players that these, behind the scenes, these are level 5 or challenge rating 5 skeletons compared to the old ones, which were, I think skeletons are, is it 1/8 or maybe they're 1? I don't remember off the top of my head. Your old skeletons were very easy to take down, and you will disarm your players very quickly if your skeletons are too powerful and they're used to fighting those. So do make a visual differentiation, or make sure that they know that these are not the skeletons from before, and you need to put up a whole lot more effort into your defense in order to save yourself from being wiped out. Quick question. How many of you like this video? Oh, we're doing that creepy thing again. Okay. Alright. But remember, the quest is simple. All you need to do is go down to the bottom here, click the like button, and then go on to click the subscribe button. Ring the bell icon so you're notified of new videos when they come out. If you like this video, I hope you'll consider supporting this channel. I've got a couple of books that I've written down in the Trumpery. They're available at Amazon, at iBooks, most all the places where books are sold. The first one is actually free. It's an ebook if you want to give it a read. These books are fiction, heavily inspired by Dungeons & Dragons, and they're hopefully really good stories. I really hope you enjoy them. You'll put $5 in my pocket if you buy it, and you'd really go a long way into helping me make this channel a success. If you'd like to see creating a monster stat block from scratch or something, I'm going to see some more in-depth information on how to adjust your monsters or create a monster from scratch, leave me a comment down here in the Trumpery, and maybe we'll make that video. In the meantime, this is Brian Carey reminding you to be a scholar and a barbarian.